Something hurt you this week. Maybe someone said something that landed harder than they meant it to. Maybe someone forgot something that mattered to you. Maybe nothing happened that anyone would call a real event. Just a small, quiet moment that bruised you more than you expected. And you didn't say anything. You smiled. You changed the subject. You made sure the other person didn't notice. You went home and handled it alone. And by the time anyone asked how you were doing, you were already past the worst of it. Or at least past the part where you would have admitted you weren't fine. Most people would call this emotional suppression, or avoidance, or being bad at communicating. But here's what they don't understand. You're not hiding because you can't speak. You're not silent because you don't feel things deeply. You're doing one of the most overlooked forms of emotional labor that exists. And you've been doing it so long and so quietly that almost no one has noticed what it's actually costing. Let's get into it. Here's the thing about people who hide pain behind silence. You didn't learn to go quiet because you have nothing to say. You learned to go quiet because somewhere along the way, you figured out that expressing pain badly caused more problems than it solved. So you got selective. You got careful. You got disciplined about when and where and with whom you allowed yourself to actually bleed. This isn't suppression. This is curation. There's a difference between someone who can't talk about their pain and someone who chooses not to because they've already calculated the cost. You are the second one. And most of the people in your life have no idea how much you've been managing on your own because you've made it your job to never let it show. That isn't a flaw. That's a skill most people never develop. The question is what it's doing to you when nobody else is watching. So let's walk through 4 quiet scenes of this pattern and what each one is really telling you. The "I'm fine." Someone asks how you are, and before you've even finished processing the question, the answer is already out of your mouth. I'm fine. 2 words. Automatic. Sometimes true, often not. But the difference doesn't matter, because you've decided, long before anyone asked, that the full answer wouldn't be useful to them. It would be heavy. It would be awkward. It would require them to do something with it, and you don't want to make them do anything. So you say I'm fine, and you mean something like, I'm dealing with it. I don't need you to worry. This isn't your problem to hold. You mean something generous, but the person hearing it just hears fine. And they move on, relieved that you're okay. And you nod, and you go back to handling it on your own. You're not lying. You're translating. You've taken something complicated and compressed it into something manageable for the person across from you. That's not dishonesty. That's a kind of quiet protection most people never even notice is happening. The crying alone rule. Something breaks you a little. You feel it coming. The pressure behind your eyes, the tightness in your chest, and you do something automatic. You find a place to be alone. The bathroom, your car, your room with the door closed. You wait until you're by yourself, and then you let it out. You don't cry in front of people, not because you don't trust them, not because you're ashamed, but because somewhere, a long time ago, you figured out that crying in front of someone turns your pain into their job. It makes them have to respond. It makes them have to comfort you. It makes them have to manage your emotional state while you're trying to manage it yourself. So you handle it privately, and you come out of the bathroom or the car or the closed bedroom with your face composed and your voice level, and you rejoin the conversation like nothing happened. This is something you don't get credit for. No one sees the bathroom cry. No one knows how many times you've excused yourself from a room to regulate something you didn't want to make anyone else witness. But you know. And the weight of all those invisible moments is sitting somewhere in your body, whether you let yourself feel it or not. The emotional doorman. You notice when someone else is struggling before they've even said anything. A shift in their voice, a flatness in their eyes, a silence that isn't their usual silence. And you do what you always do. You soften. You ask gentler questions. You create space for them to talk if they want to. You carry them for an hour or an afternoon or a whole evening, making sure they feel safe enough to let their guard down. And they do. They tell you what's going on. They cry if they need to. They feel held, and then they leave. And you never mention, at any point in that entire interaction, that something is hurting you too. That you came into the conversation already carrying something. That you are holding their pain on top of your own, and you chose to. Because you could tell they needed it more. This is the part that's hardest to see. Even about yourself. You're not just hiding your pain. You're actively making space for other people's pain while your own sits in the next room, waiting to be dealt with later. And later rarely comes. The expiration date. By the time you're ready to talk about it, it doesn't feel worth talking about anymore. You wait until you've calmed down. You wait until you can discuss it without crying. You wait until your thoughts are organized enough that you won't sound dramatic. You wait until the moment has passed, and the edges of the pain have dulled, and you can talk about it in the past tense. And then, when you finally have the conversation, if you have it at all, something strange happens. You find yourself downplaying what it actually felt like, minimizing how hard it was, saying things like, "It wasn't that bad, and I was probably overreacting anyway." You're not lying to them. You've lied to yourself first. By the time you were composed enough to talk about it, you'd already convinced yourself it didn't really hurt that much. Because if it didn't really hurt that much, you didn't really need anyone to know. And if you didn't really need anyone to know, then the silence was justified. This is how the pattern protects itself. Not by suppression, by slow, quiet self-erosion of how much you were allowed to feel in the first place. Here's the part I want you to sit with for a moment. Everything you've built, the composure, the discretion, the ability to handle your pain without burdening anyone, it's real, and it's genuinely rare. And it's something most people in your life probably don't even know you're doing. You've protected them from versions of you that would have been harder to love. But somewhere along the way, you started protecting them from versions of you that just needed to be heard. You are allowed to be held, too. You are allowed to say this is hurting me without having to calculate whether the other person can handle it, whether the timing is right, whether you've processed it enough to present it calmly. The people who love you, the real ones, can handle the unprocessed version of you. They would rather know than be spared. They would rather help than be protected from your actual life. Your silence has been a gift, but you don't have to give it every time. If this felt personal, it's because it was. You didn't learn to hide pain because you're cold. You learned because you're careful, because you've always been the one who noticed when other people couldn't handle more. And you decided quietly that you'd be the one who could. You still can, but maybe sometimes you don't have to be. Which of the 4 scenes hit closest? The "I'm fine," the crying alone rule, the emotional doorman, or the expiration date? Tell me in the comments. If this made you feel a little more seen, subscribe. There's a lot more where this came from, and I'll see you in the next one.